Hi everyone, welcome back to the Pleasuring Shed. You join me here again to make another float. We're going to look at some different types of floats in a minute, but before we move on to that, can I just say a massive thank you to everyone who has liked, subscribed, commented. It really means a lot. I know I say this at the beginning of all my videos, but both Ali and I really appreciate your comments and likes and subscribes. It's just brilliant. So thank you very much. It's very humbling. So let's move on and take a look at what we're going to do in this video. So we're stepping up a little bit. We're going to take it to the next level. We've taken a look at all the sarkanda reed floats that we've made. We've looked at the wagglers and the inserts and the bodied wagglers, etc. But now we're going to step it up a little bit. I just want to take you back to something that I made, and it was the first ever float that I really kind of made and had success with. I don't know if you can see that there. So it's a balsa body with a bamboo cane stem or bamboo skewer stem. And it takes 4 AAA to cock it, which is quite a lot. Yeah, it's a bit basic. It's a bit crude, but it did catch fish. I had a great session on it. But it just shows you with a little bit of time and a little bit of practice, we can then take it to something a little bit more professional looking. I hope you'll agree with that. So that's what we're going to take a look at today. Sorry about the noise in the background. Yeah, we'll take a little bit of a look at how we're going to make these floats. Again, it's a balsa body with a bamboo skewer through the center and then whipped at the top and bottom. So I think you'd call this kind of float a stick float. I'm going to call it a stick float. And it's fine for using on still waters. It's fine for using on rivers. So it's a really versatile float. We're going to need some materials to make it. So the body, which is this part here, that's going to be balsa wood. So we've got a nice balsa dowel here, which we're going to turn down in a minute. And then the main stem of the float, this part here, and the tip, that is a bamboo skewer. So I've got a bamboo skewer here, a nice long one. As you can see, we'll probably get 2 floats out of 1 skewer. I've used the pointy part of the skewer, this end, as my float tip, which is the bit I'm going to paint with the colour, because I just think it looks quite nice, gives a nice point to it. So we'll talk about the bamboo skewers in a minute. So let's get making. So the first thing we're going to do is measure off a section of balsa wood. We don't need that whole length. So I'm going to cut off a 4 centimetre section. So I put my glasses on. You know what my measuring's like. So we're going to measure a 4 centimetre section. So I'll place that at 4 centimetres and mark that just there. And then we're going to cut that off. So I'm going to place it in my little mitre block, and I'm going to use a razor saw. So this is a razor saw. So it's got a really fine blade just to cut through this. Balsa wood is really easy to cut through. And I'm using my mitre block so I get a nice straight cut through the middle. So I place it in the block, place the blade in the groove, and then just gently cut it off. There we are. So there's my little 4 centimetre block. What I need to do now is find the centre of here, because we want to drive the bamboo skewer straight through the centre. So I've got a fancy little gadget. Here we are here. This is my centering tool. I got it online. It's cheap as chips. So basically, we're going to use our pencil, and we place. There's a ridge there, and we place the piece of balsa wood on that ridge, and that marks the centre. And we draw a line straight through the middle, and then we're going to rotate it through 90 degrees. Draw a line straight through the middle again. Do a couple more. Sometimes the balsa is not completely circular, so the lines do wander a little bit. But once you've got a few lines on there, you can see where all the lines cross, and that's going to mark your center point. So I'm just going to use the point of the pencil just to make that a bit clearer. There we are. So I hope you can see that. That's pretty much in the center. I'm sure if you've got a micro ruler or whatever out, it might be slightly off, but it's pretty good. So we can do the same the other end. So mark a few lines on it. One more. So I'm just, with each line, I'm just rotating through 90 degrees. And then where all the lines cross, again, I'm just going to drive my pencil into the center. And there we are. Now I'm going to use a drill to drill through the balsa. And hopefully, if I've got my calculations right, it should come out the bottom end. So I've got my hole marked, and now I want to drill it. So I've got a little pillar drill here, great little thing. Got that on Amazon. Can't remember how much it was, but it wasn't expensive. Anyway, so I've got a clamp at the bottom of the pillar drill here, and I've made myself a little jig, if you want to call it that, and I'm going to place the dowel into the little hole that I've made. Now it's quite a snug fit, and I'm not overly concerned if it marks the outside of the balsa dowel here, because we're going to be sanding all that off anyway. So it's a nice snug fit, and I know that's nice and straight. So then I'm going to place that into my vise at the bottom. Make sure that's lined up. Perfect. And then just clamp that in. And then I'm going to turn it on. So it's going to get a bit noisy now, so forgive me. So that's one side done. What I need to do now is just turn it over and drill through the other side. Again, just make sure that's lined up. Perfect. So that now should have gone all the way through. Now, the drill bit that I'm using is a 2.5mm drill bit, and the bamboo skewer that we use is 3mm, so it should be a nice snug fit. So let's find a nice bit of bamboo skewer. Now, when you're choosing your bamboo skewer, there's a couple of things to look out for. So I've got a couple of just some things to show you, some examples to show you here. So if we look at this skewer, it's going to be quite difficult to see, but actually there's a bit of a knot there, and there's going to be a weak point. So if you put any pressure on that, it's going to snap. This skewer here, I don't know if you can see the color difference, but this is very pale in comparison to this one. So this skewer is actually really bendy and not ideal. So we're going to discard that one as well. And can you see as I bend it, it holds its bend. So again, it's fine for using small sections, but not for a long stem. So we don't want to use that one. So the bamboo skewer that I've chosen is a much stiffer piece of skewer, and it's a nice clean stem. So that will be a good one. It's got a little bit of a kink at the bottom, but that's not going to matter because we're not going to use that section for this float. So now I'm going to place the skewer through the center hole, and I'm going to give it a little push and twist, and fingers crossed it should come out through the hole. Hey, perfect. So keep pushing that on. There we are. And that is effectively the start of our stick float. So I'm going to measure that, cut that off to length, and then think about fixing this to the skewer. But before we do that, I think it's probably best that we turn it down. So I've got another piece of skewer that I've already pre-cut, which I use, where is it? Which I use in the lathe. Typical, can't find it, there it is. So I'm going to use this piece of skewer because I already know it fits in my lathe. Yeah, so let's take a look at the lathes and what we're going to use to actually start to turn it down. So the first lathe that I used to turn down my bodies was a bit of a bodge job, really. So I made this little setup. So it's a multi-tool. Some people call them a Dremel, but it's a multi-tool. This one's made by Draper. And I made a little stand for it here. So basically, this is adjustable. You place one end of your skewer through the hole. The other end of the skewer goes into the multi-tool. You screw that down, clamp that on, it spins, and you rub it on the sandpaper over the top of it. And that was it. That worked for me, but it wasn't very accurate. There was a bit of movement in there, and it worked fine for a while. But after a while, I thought, you know, it's about time that I actually upgraded. So I moved on, and I bought myself a little toy. So I'll put that away to one side, and I'll bring the big guns in. Here we go. So this is my new toy. So looks a bit more professional, I think you'll agree. I've made some funky little adaptations. So this is the main body of the lathe. So the motor is in here. I've got an adjustable sort of sliding tray there where I can adjust the side to hold the end of the skewer. Works in exactly the same way as the other one, but like I say, it's a little bit more professional. I mounted it on an old piece of wood that I had, and I have connected here a little bit of pipe, which is what I shoved my vacuum cleaner hose into, so all the dust gets sucked straight away. When you are sanding balsa wood, the dust is really fine, and it does irritate the lungs. I mean, I don't suffer from any kind of lung issues or anything like that, but even I find that the dust, after a while, you start to cough, and it's irritating on the back of the throat. So either please wear a mask when you're sanding your balsa, or get a vacuum cleaner and have that next to you when you're sanding, so the dust just gets sucked straight away. Good. So let's get on with this now, and we can get this sanded down, and I'll show you how I shape the body of the float. So I've got my lathe set up. My piece of dowel is set up there. I've got my vacuum cleaner connected. Let's talk a little bit about the sandpaper that I'm going to use. So I've got a nice new piece of 220 grit sandpaper, and that's going to cut through the balsa quite quickly to get it down to the shape that I want. And then I've got an old used bit of 400 grit. It's actually wet and dry paper, but it's a really lovely fine grit. So that'll just be for the finishing off. So I'm going to make a lot of noise now. I'm going to turn on the vacuum cleaner. I'm going to turn on the lathe. So if you can't hear my words, I'm sorry. Maybe we'll add some subtitles or something. So let's get sanding. Let's going to switch on the vacuum cleaner and switch on the lathe. And let's start sanding. So very gently, just starting at one end, and I'm going to just angle it and just get a nice bevel on it. I'm not putting too much pressure on, and I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but you can see the dust is going straight into the vacuum cleaner. So we're taking that down nicely. Takes a little while, don't rush this. You can put a bit too much pressure on, and then you'll end up taking too much of the balsa body off, because once it's off, you can't put it on again. So I'm just going to swap over and do the other side. Trying to keep roughly the same angle. Just keep taking it down. There we are, and then I'm going to place the paper in the middle and just lose that kind of ridge and soften that area. So there we are. So you can see very quickly I get a rough shape of what I want. Now I'm bringing in the finer sandpaper just to finish it off. There we are. Let's switch all the machines off so you can hear me speak again. And there we go. You can see we've very simply made the stick body. So let's take that off the lathe now. Incidentally, if you were making batches of these, you want to kind of keep a fairly even consistency. So I use I think they call these a feeler gauge, is it? Or a measuring gauge, digital caliper. So I would take a measurement of the diameter of the body. So this one comes out at exactly 11 mil. I started off with a 13 mil piece of balsa dowel, by the way, so it was 13 mil. So I've taken 2 mil off the center. Obviously I've taken a lot more off the ends. So that's on 11mm. And then every other one you make after that, you can kind of work out how much to take off and keep checking it with the caliper. So good. So let's get everything disconnected. So I've had a bit of a tidy up, moved the lathe to one side, and now I'm left with the body that we've turned down. So I'm going to slide this off of that stem now. So be a little bit careful because these ends can be a little bit fragile. So just slide that off carefully. Put that to one side and then find the actual skewer that you're going to use as your main stem. And we're going to slide that on. I'll go pointy end first into the hole so that we don't split it with the fat end, and just push that through very carefully. And then we're going to use this as our coloured tip. So I'm going to measure that. I want that tip there to be about 3 centimeters. So I'll just slide that down out of the way, find my pencil and my ruler, and I'm going to measure that at 3 centimeters. There we are. So that'll be the bit sticking above the water. A little bit of super glue. And we only need the tiniest amount of glue on this. So just give it time to, it's alive. Give it time to come down into the nozzle. Here it comes. And I literally want a tiny, tiny little bit. So that's all, a tiny little bit. And then I'm just going to smear that over with the end of the nozzle. And then as I move the body up to my mark, I'm going to be twisting it as I go. And that helps the glue just spread around evenly. So just sliding up and twisting as I go. Try not to stop. Keep the movement going all the way to the mark, because the moment you stop, just about got there in time. That's now solid. This glue goes off really quickly. So there we are. So we've got our coloured tip section. We've got our body on. Now we need to measure the full length of the float and get that cut to size. So let's put the lid back on the glue. And I think the float is going to be a nice 15 centimeter float. I think that's a nice length. Of course, it's your float. You can make that stem as long or as short as you want, but 15 centimeters from the tip of the colour, so right at the very tip, to the eyelet, it's going to be 15 centimeters. So I'll mark that with the pencil, and I'm going to find my side cutters and snip that off. There we are. Don't throw away the offcut. Keep that to one side. We'll get some other float bits out of that. So there we are. So that's our main body of the float made. What we need to do now is put a little flat end on here. So let's take this over to my little belt sander and let's shape it. Sorry about the noise again. Just putting a little bit of a bevel on that, and then we're going to flatten it. There we are. So we've just got a little flat edge on that now, and we're just going to put a little split down the middle, ready to take our whipping thread when we do it. So that goes in there. Now the next job we have to do, for me, is to stain it down. Now I'm not a fan of the balsa colour, but remember, these are your floats. If you want to leave that colour as it is, that's entirely up to you. But if we look at the float that we've already made, you can see the difference in the colour. So I want this new float to move down and darken into this dark brown. It's called medium oak. It's a water-based wood stain that I'm using. And I just get these little sample pots. Again, get them from online. Little sample pots of wood stain. You can buy them in huge quantities if you want to, if you're doing large stuff. But for just doing a little float like this, it's the perfect amount. So I've got my medium oak stain. Give it a little shake. And then rather than trying to dip the brush into the pot, what I do is tend to just pour a small amount into the cap. There we are. Ooh, a bit too much there, but never mind. If I was doing a large batch, that would be perfect, but I'm only doing the one at the moment. Take a soft brush Now, I'm going to be painting this tip. So that's the end I'm going to hold it. And then I can just go into stain down the rest of the body. So there we are. On goes the stain. Can be quite liberal with it. It soaks right into the balsa, so be quite generous with it. There we are. And then because we're going to darken down the stem as well, and just apply that to the stem. That's it. Take that right down. This is going to take probably, I don't know, a couple of hours to dry properly. A bit more on there just to darken it. So all I've done is I've got a little stand that I've made and drilled a load of little 3mm holes in. So I can just stand it up in there while it's drying. So I'm going to put that end in. So there it goes. In it goes. I'll just leave that to dry. So it's been a few hours since I put the initial stain on, and that's dried off quite nicely now. So it's all handleable, and you can, you're not going to get stain on your fingers. So our next job is to actually start the whipping. So I'm going to break from tradition here. And I know I use black thread at the bottom of all my floats, hence the name Black Bottom Floats. But actually today I'm going to go with a green thread. Got a dark green thread, which actually I think looks really nice against this brown stain. So our first job is to put the thread into that split. And there we are. And then we're just going to burn that end off with our lighter, just like I've done in lots of my previous how-tos. There we are. Squash that down. And now we're ready to whip. But before we whip, we need an eyelet. So get your safety pin. Cut the head off of the safety pin. Now this is where I get to use my fancy new tool. If you want to know how exciting my fancy new tool is, you need to check out my last video. I was very excited by it. But yeah, we get to use it again. So here it is. The peg. So put the eyelet onto the end of the float and then clamp it in place with the peg, making sure it's all pushed down and it's all nice and lined up. There we are. Look, I'm hands-free. How cool is that? Love this new peg. So start the whipping. We're going like we've done before. We're going to go round and under the whip. There we are. So round like that, and then over the top. Now I can slightly rotate the float rather than keep wrapping the thread around. So I'm just rotating the float. Keep turning until we've got a good amount of thread on. It's a bit cack-handed for me doing it like this for the camera, but we'll give it a go. And you can see that all right. So just keep rotating. We want to get that thread right up to the base of the eye. And then when we get to the base of the eye, we just change the angle slightly and start to come back the other way. We're whipping over the top of the threads that we've already laid down, and that gives us a nice neat finish. Again, just take your time when you're spinning that float round. You don't want it to go too fast and you end up with great big gaps or going over the same bit twice, so it gets all lumpy. So I'm going to hold that in place and take the peg off because you don't need that anymore, and carry on whipping. Oh, here we go. All the way down to the end of the little legs of the eyelet, the safety pin. And when you get to the bottom of those little legs, remember they can be a little bit sharp, so just loosen the pressure slightly so it doesn't cut the thread as you pull it over them. Make sure that's all nice and neat and tidy. Squash it all up. That's good. And then just keep gently rotating. Now I'm going to put a little bit of a design on the whipping now. So what I'm going to do is just change the angle very gently to begin with. What I want is kind of like an opening spiral. So it starts off quite a tight spiral, but as we get further up the shaft, it starts to widen. And it's almost like I don't even know how you would describe it, a widening spiral. That's the only way I can describe it. There we are. And then I'm going to square that off at the top. And there we come to almost to the finish. I have a little bit of a band on there. I'm going to clamp it under my finger. And I'm going to find my bit of trusty fishing line loop. There we go. Remember that goes underneath the thread. And then clamp that in place. Trying to get the angle for the camera, it's a bit awkward. And then again, just do 3 wraps, 3 whips over the top of that bit of fishing line. There's the third one. And then we're going to snip off the thread. So this tag end of thread is going to go through the loop. And then we're going to pull the loop underneath the thread that we've just whipped. It can be a bit tight on these stems, but there we are. Through we go. Put your loop to one side so you don't lose it. And there we are. That's the bottom end of the float all whipped on. Just got to snag off. We've just got to snip off the tag end. Using a really sharp knife. There we are. Now the next thing I like to do is just whip over the join here where the balsa body meets the bamboo skewer, and it just neatens up that joint. Again, it's personal choice. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but it's something I like to do just to give it a little bit of an extra neat edge. The start of this whipping is a little bit different. Remember at the bottom end here we were able to put it in that little split we made, but we haven't got that split anymore. So we're going to start off by placing the thread along the line of the stem, and we're going to be whipping up the stem onto the balsa rather than from the balsa onto the stem. It's always easier to whip uphill than it is to whip downhill. So place your thumbnail. I only want a small amount of whipping, so clamp it under your thumbnail there. Hope you can see that. And then again, we're going to go underneath and whip over the top of the thread that I've just placed there. It's all a bit awkward. There we are. I hope you can see this. And whipping towards the balsa body. Once I've got a few turns on there, I'll be able to release my thumb and you'll see things a bit easier. There we are. So now I'm just going to rotate slowly to cover over that tag end, and that grips it in place. Neaten that up. And now what I want to do is just snip off that tag end. So sharp blade again, mind your fingers. Snip that off. And then I'm just going to continue to whip up the stem and just onto the body, the balsa body. Just as it starts to touch the balsa body, I'm going to pause there and I'm going to get my piece of fishing line. Tuck that in. And then again, I'm whipping over the top of the fishing line for another 3 whips. I don't want to put too much pressure on this bit of whipping because if you pull that thread nice and tight, it will very easily cut into the balsa. So be a little bit careful here. I think I've done 4 there. Someone tell me in the comments whether I did 3 or 4. Scissors to cut off the excess. and then take the tag end, pass it through the line. Remember, all the time I've not released that pressure on my finger there, clamping the threads there. So pull the line and then pull the fishing line back underneath where you whipped. There we are. Put that to one side. And there we are. We're done. So I'm just going to snip off the tag end. Be very careful that you don't cut into the threads that you've laid down. Now, as I've snipped that one, I've noticed, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little bit of thread just hanging there. So what we're going to do is use a lighter just to cinch that off. Is that a word? To cinch it off? I think it is. So just use your lighter and just, there we are, it's gone. So just show you that. You can see that that thread has disappeared. As you can see what I did there, you don't need to hold the lighter underneath because you will literally just melt the thread in seconds and it will catch fire. Just move the thread towards it and you'll see your little fluffy bit just disappear or just disintegrate. So there we are. So we've got the whipping done. I think our next job now is to seal that with a coat of our Rustings clear varnish. So Rustings outdoor clear varnish is what I'm using. I hope you can see that. I've used that on all my products. You've seen it before. I'm not going to bore you with actually painting the whole thing on or varnishing the whole thing on. But what I do want to show you is the difference in the colour. So this is the float that I just whipped. And this is a float that I varnished previously and has allowed time to dry. So just, you can see it, maybe if I hold it against my hand, you'll see the difference. When you put the varnish on, it really does darken down the thread. I'm hoping you can see the difference between the two. So the one on this side is the unvarnished, and the one on this side is the varnished. So if you are using a thread and you like the color of it, just bear in mind that when you put that varnish on, it will darken down. So that's something to consider. I quite like it darkened down. I like that color. So I'll put that one to one side. And as I said before, I have already varnished this. So our next job is to paint a white tip to begin with. So if I've got one here that I prepared earlier, magic of television. So there we are. We've used the white paint on that. And that is the Revel Matte 5 plain white. Yeah, just giving that a coat of white. Let that dry off. And once that's painted, now it comes where you want to be a little bit creative. Now I've kept these tips quite simple. And as you can see, I've just gone one color. So this is the orange. I've got a yellow. There we are. I've got a yellow. And I've got a red as well. No, that one's orange. Let's find the red one. Get in the hole. There we are. And I've got this one, which is red. So I hope you can see the difference between the three different colors there. So choice is yours. You can put a band of color at the bottom and have two-tone if you want, or you can put a band of color at the tip, like some people like to put a bit of black on the tip. But I've just gone for a single color. So that's where we are. So let's move those ones out of the way. We'll come to those later. So from white, we use the yellow. I've gone for silk matte 312, again from Revel. So that's a nice bright yellow. I'll put two coats of that on. I'll put two coats of the white on, and I'll put two coats of the yellow on. And I would recommend two coats of any of the colors that you use, so that we don't get any dark shadows when we start to put on the color. So once that's dried off, the next job is to just neaten it up from where the color meets the body. It's a bit messy. I don't like that. So again, just like we did at the bottom end of the body, I'm just going to put a small piece of whipping just to cover up that join. So I'm going to do exactly the same with this piece of whipping as I am with this piece. And that is start on the float tip and whip up the body, up onto the body. So exactly the same as we did at that end, we're going to do at this end. And here's one I prepared earlier. So as you can see, we put that little band of whipping there Again, same colour, it's all in the dark green, or it started off quite light green, but got darker as we varnished it, and I've put a coat of varnish over that as well. So the whole float has had at least 2 coats of varnish. The body's actually had 3 coats of varnish. So yeah, so that's now ready to put in our test tank to get the shotting weight. So I'm going to guess it's going to be about 4 BB. Lots of my floats are around 4 BB. That's a nice weight, I think. Somewhere between 3 and 4 BB. It's a nice weight. Get a good cast on it, but it's also nice and sensitive. So I'm just going to slide a bit of line on that. I've already got 3 BB on there, and I'm going to put the 4th one on to lock it in place. And here we go. Let's see what happens. I'm feeling it might be a little heavy, but let's see. Wow, that's not bad. But one thing, I want it to dot down just a tiny bit more. I think a number 4 might be a bit too much, so I'm going to go with a number 6 on that. So tiny. I don't like using number 6 because they're so fiddly. So let's just pop a number 6 on the end. There we are. Let's see what that does. Perfect. Very happy with that. As you can see, it sets itself back to the line just nicely and nice and quickly as well. So yeah, really sensitive to bites. Just a little pull on that and you can see that dots down and settles really nicely. So yeah, very happy with that. So that's, what did we say, 4 BB and a number 6. So quite a heavy float. The more you take off the balsa body, the lighter shotting you're going to have. The fatter your balsa body, the more shotting you're going to need. So there we are. So let's take the shot off that and give that a dry. And then we're going to write on the stem the shotting weight. Of course, you don't have to do all this. You could do this bank side. It's really not a problem, but it just does save a little bit of time. So we'll take our pen, permanent marker pen, Sharpie. I'm going to write on there 4 BB. And a number 6. There we are. Now, normally I'd write black bottom floats along the stem, but I don't think I'm going to fit that in there. And I don't want to write it on the body because I think that'll look a bit tacky. So there we are. So that's on there. Next thing is to put another coat on there of the Rustin's clear varnish, the outdoor water-based varnish, and that will seal in the lettering. It's pretty sealed anyway, or it's pretty permanent with the permanent marker, but I do like to give it an extra coat of varnish before we put the yacht varnish on over the top. So that's my next job, is to give that another coat of varnish. So I put the extra coat of the Rustin's clear gloss varnish on there, the outdoor varnish, and then I have also, you don't need to see me doing this, I've also put on a coat, like 2 coats actually, of the satin yacht varnish, again from Rustin's. I'm not sponsored, but if you are listening, Rustin's, I'm happy to take sponsorship. So there we are. So that's done, that's completed now, and I've given that chance to dry. So that's had a good long dry. So when you're putting the yacht varnish on, the varnish will be touch dry in probably about 12 hours, 8 to 12 hours, but it will be quite soft. So once you've put that final coat of yacht varnish on, hang it up to dry somewhere, room temperature, and just leave it for a couple of weeks. Yeah, genuinely a couple of weeks. So that allows the varnish to dry right through to the inside and goes nice and hard. So yeah, so that's what we've done with this one. So I made this one a couple of weeks ago and it's gone nice and hard. So our next job is to get out on the bank and see if we can catch a fish with it. Hey YouTubers, how are we doing? So we are on the lake side. So we've made our float and here we are on the lake. We're going to check it out in a minute. But first, let's talk about the rod we're going to use. It's quite a special rod today. So this rod is a Eggerseely spin rod, which is probably not what you'd think we'd use for a bit of carp fishing, but this is what we're going to use today because it's quite special. So this rod belonged to my amazing editor and filmer and everything else behind the scenes stuff, Ali. This was her dad's, and he used it for every bit of fishing you can think of. It was his go-to rod for everything. Ali sadly lost her dad shortly, a while ago, and yeah, it was a rod that holds a very special place in Ali's heart, and she asked me to try and restore it because it was a bit battered. A few of the rings had broken. It was a little bit bruised. But I didn't want to restore it back to new. I didn't think that would be appropriate. So I tried to do quite a sympathetic restoration. So what I did is I replaced most of the rings because most of them were rusty and knackered. But the tip ring was actually very good. And the tip ring is whipped on by George, Ali's dad. And so I definitely didn't want to remove that because that's his work up there and it deserves to stay there. So, yeah, the blank itself, there's loads of little nicks and knocks and varnish has been scratched off it. And again, I didn't want to lose that because it's part of its history. It's its patina and all those fancy words you use describing it being a bit old and a bit battered. So I've just revarnished it basically. So whipped the new eyes on and then given it a good revarnish. Cleaned up the handle a little bit, but again, I didn't want to do too much to the handle purely because that's George on there. So, you know, we're going to leave him there. The reel, let's talk a little bit about the reel. This is brand new, this reel, and I thought it fitting because this rod is probably from the mid-70s, I would say, to find an age-appropriate reel. So this is a Shakespeare Standard 2006. There we are. Means nothing to me, or a Shakespeare Norris, or a Norris Shakespeare. But it's a lovely little reel, probably from the mid-70s. Very simple, very basic fixed spool reel, but it's practically brand new. And I paid, get this, I paid the princely sum of £10 for this reel. It came in its original box with a spare spool and the instruction manual. So I was very, very happy with that purchase. So that's the rod and reel we're going to use. Let's hope we can do George justice and catch him a nice fish or two. So let's talk about the float. So we've seen the float before because we made it in the workshop, in the pleasuring shed. Pop the rod down. So here we are. So that's the float that we made. And we're going to try and catch a fish with it now. So I've attached it with a little float rubber just there. So the float sits straight up. So the line's going in through the top of the float there, through the float rubber, out the eye at the bottom. Fix that with a split shot there. That's because I've set the depth. So I've plumbed it already and I've set the depth and I've put a split shot just underneath the float so that if the float moves up the line, I know that I can move it back down to that shot again and I know that I'm back on the depth that we plumbed it at. So I've got a little bulker shot under that, little 3BB. The float itself is 4BB and a number 4. So I've got one right underneath the float and then I've got a little bulker shot just below that. And then I've got nothing on the line then, right the way down to the hook. Now I've put that little number 4 shot right at the bottom, about, what, 6 inches from the hook itself. I've gone straight through with the line. On the reel is £6 line, straight through. And I've got that down to a size 14 hook. And I've got a little cube of Spam on there. I've fished this fishery a few times, and for me, the fish do love a bit of Spam. So we're going to stick with the Spam, and let's see what happens. So, come on, George. Don't let us down. So, here we go with our first cast. I'm just checking the drag. Seems okay. Right then, here we go. Oh, I didn't like that one. It's a bit too close. That's better. Right, we're in. Whoops. So, like I say, I'm fishing with ham on the hook, and I'm going to loose feed. Oh, that float's sitting very low. I'm going to loose feed with some just some 4mm pellets. Just some scratching sinking pellets and just a few of those over the top just to see what happens. Oh, goodness me, that was quick. I'm not sure if it's still there. Something's having a go. This place can be quite incredible at times. You get it just right. The fish are everywhere. There's even some tension here, so keep your fingers crossed, everybody. That initial, and we're in. Ooh. Angry little fish in here they are. It's coming right at me. Check the drag. Yeah, loosen that a little. That's better. Well, that didn't take long, did it? Blimey. First cast. What have we got? Well, nice bend in that rod. Incidentally, it's a solid glass rod, so it's really quite stiff. And it's quite heavy as well. So yeah, so I don't want to pressure this fish too much because there isn't that much give in the rod itself. I don't think it's a monster. A couple of pounds maybe. Let's get the net ready. Absolutely beautiful morning. Sun's just coming through. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning now. The birds are going bananas. Don't know if the mic is picking that up, but it's just beautiful listening to all of that. And with a fish on the end of this amazing little rod as well. Just brilliant. Proper Mr. Crabtree. Oh, these angry little fish, they don't want to give up. Ooh, away from the reeds. Goodness me. Oh, there we go. Looks like a little mirror. Just hope it stays on. Fighting like anything it is. There we are. We're ready. Here she comes. And we're in the net. Fantastic. Nice one, George. A very respectable fish for a very respectable rod. Let's get it on the mat. There we are. Now, where's the hook? Where's the hook gone? Did it come out already? Oh, there we are. Hook's come out. Marvellous. That saves a bit of trouble. Beautiful little mirror. Again, still very angry. Let's calm him down a little bit. There we are. Right, you ready? Oh, he's got his fin up as well. No, he hasn't. There we are. First fish. Very respectable. Great little scrap on that little 7-foot rod. Marvellous. Let's put him back. I've got a feeling there's plenty more in there. And away. Nice one. Slime. Okay, here we go again. So fish on the first cast. Let's make sure we can get a fish on the second cast. That'll be great, wouldn't it? That's Georgie's looking down on us and encouraging the fish to... Oh, got snagged. That's not good, is it? Oh, there we are. Still got the bait. No. So, note to self, snag under the end of the deck there. So a little cube of luncheon meat. Let's drop off some line. And there we are. And we're fishing again. So a little handful of pellets over the top. And let's see what happens. I have a feeling it's not going to be long. We caught the time just right and the fish are properly feeding. There's carp topping everywhere. The yellow is really noticeable against the dark brown of the water. That's good. It's good to mix up your tip colour. You know, different tips will help you with different colour of water and... Oh, there we are, the little knock there. Yeah, different colours of water. When the sun's shining on it and you get that white water effect, sometimes a black tip can help. Oh. Yeah, so it's always good to experiment. And when you're making your floats, don't forget, don't just paint them red or paint them yellow. Try and experiment. You know, you've got blues and greens and whites, blacks, yellows. Yeah, so you might find a colour that really sticks out to you. And it's always good to have a little experiment. Right. And a little bit of meat on there. A bit of line. There we are. And we're fishing. Have a little indication there. Maybe a little sprinkle of pellets over the top might just get the fish going. There we are. Let's see what happens. Oh, missed it again. The actions of a snail we've got. Right, let's go a little bit further out this time. Let's see if that has an effect. A little bit more line. A little pinch of pellets over the top. I'm only putting in, I don't know, a dozen or so. Well, that was a bit of a savage take. Blimey. Didn't mess about there. Oh, it's off. Oh, so annoying. And he's got me in a tangle. Right, let's sort this out. Okay, here we go. Cast number 5, I think. And we're in. Little pinch of pellets. Sit back and wait. Wow, absolutely brilliant. Let's see if this one stays on. Again, not a monster, but they do put up a valiant scrap here. They really do. Such good fun. especially on light gear. It's easy if you've got big heavy carp gear on, just wheel them in. There's no fun in that. You want light tackle, light line, small hooks, and just have fun. No trouble at all for this little rod. It's taken every bang and dip in its stride. Oh, there it is. Only a bubby. Oh, my landing net's miles away. Typical. Another young mirror safely in the net. Marvellous. Let's have a look. Yes, very respectable. Now, are you going to behave? Does the hook come out again? Where's that gone? I love these unhooking fish. They're great. Every lake should have one. So there we are. Another beautiful little mirror. Only small, but great fun on its light gear. Behave, behave. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, really good fun. Cracking little rod. Lovely fish. Let's head back to the pleasuring shed and let's talk about what we're going to do next. So we're back in the pleasuring shed, and I have to say, our little float performed magnificently. What a haul of fish. Fantastic. Great sport. Really enjoyed it. So get yourself some balsa wood, get yourself some tools, and see how we go. I mean, it doesn't have to be amazingly detailed like mine. Remember my first float? There's the difference. But this one worked just as well as this one did. We don't have to look amazing. They just have to work. So get out there, make some floats, take them fishing, and enjoy your time. Now let's talk a little bit about the next video. I'm going to try and do something a little bit different on the next video. I have a bit of a passion for vintage tackle. I've got a huge collection. No, that's not true. I've got a collection. I wouldn't say it was huge compared to some people's, but I have a collection of some vintage tackles, some rods, and some old classic split canes, and some fiberglass rods from the 60s and 70s, etc. So I thought, rather than do a making of floats video, we'll just do a straight fishing video with a few little special guest stars. And I'm going to give you a little hint as to what one of them might be. I'm just going to slide it into view. I'm just going to show you the brand name of the float. The float, floats on the brain. The brand name of the rod. I hope you can see that. I'm not going to say it out loud. I'm just hoping that you can read that on the camera there. All right. So a little teaser for you. So join me in the next video when we put this classic rod into use and see if we can catch some fish. Join me then. Bye now.